Thanks, Emer, and welcome everyone along to another event that we have Emer has organised for affiliates and member companies of IFA together. We very much welcome you along. We wish we were together in a big room and could have had coffee and so on together and chat and so on and so forth. But the key thing is that we want to continue to provide insight, analysis, understanding of the sector we're working in for members and affiliates together, so that we produce a better outcome, do better business, and manage to deliver the services that we're all committed to. So this morning I'm delighted, of course, that we do have the absolutely essential providers of critical infrastructure for the pharmaceutical industry. That's our wholesalers here, represented by David Keyes and Dermot Power. And they will have a very interesting presentation for us about the experience during COVID-19 so far. Who knows what's going to happen next, and we will have a look at what they will be willing and very happy to discuss, how they see what the future might be in the sort of second half of the year and beyond, and indeed what lessons they take for the, as I say, the critical function of wholesaling in the pharmaceutical, the supply of medicines to the public. This is, as Emer said, competition law compliant, both because we have the two main wholesalers here, but also because all our companies are very, very conscious of that, and IFA operates with strict compliance with competition law at all times. So please do sit back and relax, and do ask some questions. Emer will compare and indeed host the questions at the end. If you're absolutely dying to get a question in, you may raise your voice at any time, and feel free to look up the list of the other participants and make contact with each other afterwards. And thank you very much, and let's have hope you have a very good meeting this morning. Thank you. Sorry, maybe I should say it's over to Dermot at this point, unless Emer, you want to come back in.
No, not at all. Dermot can take over now.
Good morning, everyone. Dermot here, Dermot Ryan, Managing Director of Uniphar Retail and Supply Chain. Just before I start, I'd like to thank everybody at IFA for giving us this opportunity to share some of our insights and our challenges of the COVID-19 period to date. Just to Oliver and Emer also within the IFA team. I'd also like to thank Gwen Morley from IQVIA for allowing us to share a couple of data slides in the presentation, and also just to thank David Keyes from McKesson for his collaboration on this sort of joint initiative through the PDF. It's really good to have this opportunity, as I've said, just to share our insights and our challenges. My own personal view is that the two file and wholesalers are probably undervalued in the supply chain, and hopefully over the next 30 minutes or so we can probably give you some of the reasons why. Just to begin, if I can just give you an overview of the PDF membership. Obviously, the PDF is down to 2 members. It was formed back in the early 90s, at a time when there were many more wholesalers than there are today. I suppose if you look at what we've come together under the PDF umbrella to do, it's really a trade association. It's to try and have a unified voice for both business and for the sector. Obviously, McKesson, through their pre-wholesale business, their wholesale business, their consumer business, and then I suppose both members are vertically integrated at retail level with Lloyd's Pharmacy and Media and Healthcare on the McKesson side, and then the home care and the nursing support service through TCP. Both members of the PDF have 6 distribution centres, and McKesson have 1,600 employees. Uniphar Group, I suppose a lot of change in the last number of years within Uniphar. The wider group has 2,200 employees. The business is split into 3 divisions: supply chain and retail, commercial and clinical, and product access. Within the supply chain division, very similar structure to McKesson: wholesale business, pre-wholesale business, consumer business, and then our our retail pharmacy offering through Life and All Care Pharmacies, and then our nurse-led support business through Point of Care. Again, 6 distribution centres and 1,200 staff within the supply chain and retail business. If I can just move on and give you maybe a snapshot of who we are, if you like. Obviously, considerable scale through both businesses, almost 2 billion in turnover, 90% of the market, 151 million units used. At customer level, obviously, sort of working with top 250 manufacturers through our pre-wholesale and wholesale business, and then we've 2,000 unique customers at primary and secondary care level, hospital and pharmacy. And again, it's pre-wholesale and wholesale, and then our retail services business. It's a full service offering, so we would be stocking probably north of 15,000 SKUs at this stage, heavily serviced in terms of 11 deliveries a week into hospital and retail pharmacy. And I suppose with that scale and with that level of service offering, as Oliver mentioned earlier, we're in a key part of the national health infrastructure. And then both businesses own pharmacies. So obviously the Lloyd's brand is very familiar to everybody through McKesson's ownership, and then All Care on the Uniphar side with about 60 pharmacies. So well over 150 pharmacies owned by the PDF members. In terms of market challenges, I suppose the wholesale model is challenged, and I suppose that's not just an Irish phenomenon. That's right across Europe. You only have to look at the recent agreement in Germany between McKesson and Walgreens Boots Alliance, where they've agreed to combine their wholesale operations in a joint venture agreement. I suppose we're at wholesale level, we're the meat and the sandwich between obviously the government and the payer on one side and the manufacturer on the other side. Just to give you a few insights into some of the challenges we face, if you look at, I suppose, the value of what we move every day, and if you exclude the specialty medicines within that, I suppose the value of each unit that we move has fallen by about 50% since 2009. We do have an aging population in Ireland, so average market volumes are growing by 2-3% each year. So we're obviously doing more, but so over the last sort of 10 years, we've seen about 300 more pharmacies open. So the number of customers we're serving has increased by over 15%. And if you look at that from a transport perspective, that alone accounts for about 170,000 more deliveries each year that we have to do. Obviously, with genericization and the expansion of the portfolio of stock and SKUs that we have to list, that's probably impacted on our operational ability in terms of it slows down our pick. It's a less efficient pick within our businesses, and obviously we're highly automated. So we would love to have everything in an A-frame and pick it really efficiently. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So we're doing more for less. It's a really tight business in terms of margin. And then our customer base is probably under more and more pressure. If you look at, for example, our pharmacy customers, they're obviously seeing falling margins, higher costs. Retail pharmacy is seen as less attractive part of pharmacists coming out of pharmacy school these days. So real challenges around attracting pharmacists into retail pharmacy. And there's a burden of self-regulation now within pharmacy, and obviously there's other issues at play in terms of the approval of claims and that type of thing. So we've had the high-tech hub, we've had FMD. So again, it's a really challenged area, and for us, I suppose it's a massive capital investment for the return on capital employed that we actually achieve. So lots of challenges out there within the wholesalers, but not just in an Irish context. If I can just talk about the PDF and sort of recent collaborations, obviously we've put a lot of work into the development of the rollout of FMD. We've been involved with the IMVO throughout that period. We've board representation on the IMVO. The high-tech hub was launched in March 18, and I suppose both wholesalers through the PDF were heavily involved in that. We provided an integrated IT solution to the PCRS, and that changed the relationship, if you like, with our orders and through our order channels. So rather than it being a pharmacy to product order, it became a patient to product order. So it did change internally some of the process that we relied upon previously. We have been working with the HSE over the last number of months in terms of developing a decommissioning solution for hospital, and I think that's a really good example of the collaboration and the work that the PDF has been doing over the last two or 3 years, and that solution is now live in over 50 acute hospital settings. I suppose just to talk about COVID, I suppose our big focus early on in COVID, and David will talk about this later on, was really to try and get some form of dialogue going within the HSE, and we managed to do that through Dean Sullivan, who is the Chief Strategy Officer. And we out of that dialogue, I suppose our distribution centres and our delivery systems were classified as part of the critical infrastructure of the health services. And there was a very strong commitment from the HSE to support and assist us in any way possible through that. So I suppose that commitment included having the army on standby if required, and that gave us an ability, I suppose, to share that with our own teams across our distribution centres, and it provided, great comfort to our employees and helped sort of calm our teams on the ground in the earlier part of March as the situation was unfolding. I suppose the big thing for us to come out of that dialogue with the HSE is, I think there's a much greater sense of what we do and how important that is within the National Health Service. And it probably took a pandemic to do it, but I suppose we're glad that we have that level of understanding now at very senior level within the HSE. Just maybe before we start getting into the COVID period, I think it's really important that we probably just give a little bit of an overview on how we work. Both our wholesalers are highly complex because of some of the issues I probably touched on earlier, but I suppose our service offering demands that we are highly process driven. I think it's fair to say we're incredibly lean businesses. We don't carry huge cost, but with that comes the fact that we don't carry massive amounts of additional capacity. We're structured in similar ways, as I said. We both have flagship distribution centres in Magna Park and City West. I know on the Uniphar side that we would process more than 80% of our volume from our City West facility here on a daily basis. We both have smaller regional depots. As I've said, we're full service offering in terms of the products we stock, so 15,000 SKUs. Down at wholesale level, we're probably carrying on average about 15 days stock. We do have limited capacity to store, but we also have limited capacity to actually get product into our goods in our goods in team. And obviously, because we're highly automated, we do have to break down pallets and cases into packs to go into the automated robots and that sort of thing. So from a delivery point of view, again, we would deliver twice a day. So what that really means is we have very narrow pick windows. You can get a pharmacy in Dublin with a cutoff of 11:45 today, and they can send their order right up to that cutoff time, and they will have that stock probably in their pharmacy on their shelf by 2:30, 2:45. So those narrow windows provide a huge challenge to us in terms of how we can turn around the orders and how we get it out. I suppose the challenge with this model is that, sometimes when something comes from left field, it does throw us off kilter, and we've seen that with some of the recent adverse weather events like Storm Ophelia, Storm Emma, that something comes at us. It's difficult, and it takes us time to react to some of those sort of left field issues, and obviously COVID in that context was one of those issues. This is just a snapshot of a typical sort of day in the life operationally for us. It just gives an overview of the throughput through our business on a 24-hour basis. Providing this level of service and servicing the market just doesn't happen by chance, but it's just 35,000 orders a day, over 550,000 units, 230 vans and trucks on the road, 80,000 kilometers covered, 2,000 call center calls into both our call center, 5,000 man hours per day. So it's a really substantial undertaking to deliver the service level that we do out in the market. Just to sort of get into the specifics around the COVID challenge, I suppose. This is just, and again, it's courtesy of Gwen Morley at IQVIA, but this is just the market demand profile. So we can see sort of weeks 1 to 7, average of 3 million units in the market, sort of normal trading. I think the market up to that point was slightly up, maybe 2 or 3%. We then move into the pre-COVID restrictions. So week 8 and 9 saw the start of the consumer demand, particularly around the OTC category. And we had the media news from China, Italy, Spain. We could be beginning to see the impact of the virus on various parts of the world. And I think that started to trigger the demand. We then get into sort of the announcement of the COVID restrictions, and I suppose the retail demand then was followed by other demand in other product classes that we saw in terms of maybe asthma and COPD or some of the antivirals. And then, we had to make some decisions about how we manage the demand. And, David's going to talk about that later, but we had to put allocations in place, and that was really just to manage the demand. The red line indicates what we would consider to be a safe level of operational demand. And it was by implementing those measures that we were able to get back on track and start to manage the situation, because we were desperately out of control at one point, I think it's fair to say. And then we move on to the sort of the final phase, which is the reduced demand phase. And from week 16 right up until the end of June, we've seen demand drop well below pre-COVID levels and well below prior year levels. And again, that's probably symptomatic in terms of GPs and the way they're operating, and obviously the hospitals as well, in terms of what their focus was purely around COVID. There was no elective surgery. Private hospitals were taken over by the public hospitals. So we've seen a huge drop in demand from week 16. This is another way of looking at it, but it's got the number of cases and the number of deaths obviously mapped in against the weekly base. So you can see the market plus 3% up to week 9, week 9 to 11 plus 30%, big spike, and then from 11 to 16 we see about 13% above prior year numbers, and then we start to see the demand fall away, and we can see that we're operating below prior year levels for the last number of weeks. Just to say that this is based on the sell-in by both wholesalers, but it's also based on the fact that we manage demand. So it's not necessarily demand we were being asked to service, but it's just the demand that we actually did service. Again, if you drill down underneath this and just look at the pure consumer side, you can see that on the back of the media reports and what we were seeing in other countries, you can start to see the spike much earlier, probably towards the end of February, and then lasting well into March. And I think it's fair to say, when you look at what's happened since week 16 and 17, we're minus 17 for the period 16 to 20, minus 13 from 20 to 23. That there's a huge level of overstock probably in most households in terms of what they were buying. Within asthma and COPD, I suppose we see the demand spike slightly later than consumer, but it obviously falls away in a similar fashion. And then with the antivirals, we see a much shorter, sharper spike. And obviously within COPD and antivirals, we can see that demand has come back much quicker than the consumer market. So just to talk about sort of how we try to approach the issues that we were facing, I suppose that the challenge was trying to understand what it meant for both our businesses. We could see what was happening in other countries. The issue for us was, when would it arrive? How would it arrive? What would the government do? And how? Obviously, we'd seen the panic buy in relation to some of the consumer products, so we were already dealing with that. And I suppose we were very, very quickly into a sort of crisis management, assembling our crisis management teams, refocusing the business, refocusing our KPIs, and trying to get a handle on where we were going. Obviously, there was significant noise in the system, and there was a lot of panic, a lot of anxiety. There was anxiety amongst our own teams. across our businesses. That had to be dealt with and managed. We were starting to see the customer demand, and we were trying to understand and analyze those buying patterns, and actually trying to understand what was going on. I suppose we had three key priorities. One was to manage the safety of our teams and our distribution centres, trying to understand and manage the demand, and then communication and engagement, both internal and external, was of priority. So we spent a lot of time understanding how we were going to deal with it from a team safety point of view, trying to understand the analysis, trying to understand how we could increase capacity. Sorry, not always easy for us. Trying to look, could we bring in additional capacity? Was there resilience in the system? If drivers went down, if teams went down, and then at the end of all of that, we had to consider, if we were going to get paid, or what was going to happen. Obviously, private hospitals were being taken over by the state, public hospitals. We did a lot of other issues to try and deal with. In terms of health and safety, obviously our first priority was our people and our facilities. We emptied our two head offices, and non-critical staff were obviously transferred to home working. That in itself was a challenge. We had to become, we had to run the business virtually, and all our internal meetings. Visitors were effectively, banned from both headquarters and all our depots. PPE was a challenge. Obviously sourcing it, so trying to get it in, trying to get it across the full business was a significant challenge. Hand sanitizers, gloves, all of that stuff that had to be done. I think the thermal imaging, I think both our businesses went for the same structure of thermal imaging, but that gave our teams huge confidence, and I think it managed to calm our teams down, I think, on the distribution side. And then extensive engagement. I've touched on the engagement with the HSE. We were obviously involved with the Department of Health. We were talking to IFA, and we were talking to as many of our principals on the pre-hold side as we could also throughout that period. And then this is just a snapshot of some of the preventive measures that we did. As I said, non-essential staff were moved off site, and we had deep cleaning and fogging, deep cleaning on standby and fogging happening in both facilities. Obviously the PPE was issued to all our operational teams. We had to stagger our breaks. We had to look at how our canteens were structured, social distancing in canteens. We reduced the service in our canteens, hand sanitizers, perspex glass, and then obviously all our communication and all our signage. The thermal imaging, again, separate entrances, thermal imaging coming in and coming out, and being able to manage that. Communication was obviously key. At the same time, the government announced the temporary wage subsidy scheme, and obviously that had an impact, initially for us in some of our distribution centres in terms of productivity, and people were quite worried, and they made a decision that they were going to self-isolate, or they were going to remain outside the business during that period, and so we had to manage that. And I suppose communication with our teams, both the off-site teams and the on-site teams, was vitally important, and we obviously had to look at how we did that through video, through all sorts of intranet communication and that type of thing. And I suppose, where are we today? Well, we're looking at a significant cost. I mean, just talking to David as we prepared these slides, we're probably looking at north of €1 million on a combined basis for both our business in terms of additional costs of working throughout the period. So really challenging, and very expensive, and a cost that we've sucked up ourselves, I suppose. I'm going to hand you over to David now, who's going to take you through the second half of the presentation.
Dermot, thank you very much indeed. Ian, we're just checking I can be heard.
Yeah.
That's
yes,
cool.
you can indeed. Yeah, no problem.
So, Dermot, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Guys, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail now about the communication challenge and practically how we reacted to COVID, and then a little bit about how we move forward. So in relation to stakeholder engagement, and if we roll it back to March, this is pretty much an international crisis. It's something that's gripped the country like nothing that I can remember in my lifetime, and certainly there is a significant amount of noise in the system. And from our perspective, from a supply chain perspective, what we're trying to do is to kind of cut through the noise, establish clarity as much as we possibly can. And if you like, on the right-hand side of that particular slide, you know, from a retail perspective, from a hospital perspective, from a supplier perspective, and the, you know, the bottom image is representing our own internal network. So, you know, as companies, we needed to individually communicate to that cohort of stakeholders. And then on the left-hand side of the list, you know, and I think from an IFA perspective, IFA pretty much facilitated the engagement, which was very, very useful for us. From a HPRA perspective, we had weekly sessions with the HPRA. As a PDF, we had individual sessions. They were trying to assist us. They were trying to understand the situation. At the same time, they were reminding us of our legal obligations in terms of equity of access of medicines and critical medicines. And that became a bit of a challenge. From a Department of Health perspective, you know, there was a communications sessions, there was continuity of supply sessions, and they were big sessions where, you know, everybody was really trying to do their best in the public interest. And then from a HSE perspective, as Dermot mentioned, very, very significant engagement, very detailed engagement at a very high level with the HSE. As Dermot mentioned, at one stage, talking about using armed forces to help us if some element of our distribution or operational infrastructure became compromised. But what was really important for us, on the next slide, please, Dermot, was actually, thanks, Dermot, was actually getting official recognition and the status that we were part of the HSE's critical care infrastructure. And on the one hand, when, if you like, the rest of the country was being told to go home and to stay home, we were asking our teams to come to work, but not just to come to work as you would normally do, to step up, to work longer hours, to work different shift patterns in a very challenging environment. And, you know, we had situations whereby, you know, an evening shift in Magna Park would normally finish at 11, 12 o'clock. You know, there were people working until 4 a.m. consistently week on week, and not even getting to finish the work at 4 a.m. They just, you know, there's points in time where you just have to finish what you're doing because other elements of the operation need to catch up, or, you know, dispatch is full, or, you know, certain pieces like that. So it was very important for us to get that critical care infrastructure status. You know, and I guess just to mention, when you look across Europe, critical care infrastructure in some cases wasn't granted to wholesalers, but in other cases, actually, people who were healthcare workers had improved access, you know, to schools and creches, and you know, the government really worked hard to facilitate those guys going to work and doing this very, very important role. So that's just a little bit on communication and that critical care infrastructure status. In terms of the demand management, and just to the next slide, please, Dermot. So the initial increase in demand, guys, was absolutely staggering. And just remember that the great charts from IQVIA, that shows the demand that we serviced, but the actual demand that came at us was just absolutely huge. And in terms of how we reacted, it was a case of a good plan today being better than a perfect plan tomorrow, because we really had to react quickly. Time was of the essence, you know, and when you look at a portfolio of 15,000 products, we needed to understand what product categories and what SKUs were driving all of this demand. I think we have a case of one OTC product where we sold a year's worth of volume in a week. You know, so you had some crazy spikes going on. And then when we identified those spikes, how much stock did we have in the system? What was coming in from a demand perspective? Because we obviously needed more of some. To facilitate more of some, we needed less of other stuff. So we had to build stocks of certain products, but reduce them of other products. In terms of customer behavior, this was really interesting because, you know, today pharmacies, generally speaking, have a primary wholesaler and a secondary wholesaler, but the gloves came off, and understandably, customers were just trying to get whatever they could from wherever they could, and, you know, we were being, you know, just we were being hit by massive orders from, from every possible source where they could come from, be it electronic orders, be it rep orders, be it customer service orders on the phone. So you were hit with a tsunami of orders coming from customers. At the same time, we had our legal obligations. So, equity of access of products to all customers who have the right bona fides. And we're dealing with retailers, we're dealing with hospitals. Is one more important than the other? It becomes quite a challenge to manage that situation. And if you like, all of that fed into what became our COVID response. So in terms of the next slide, please, Dermot. So in terms of demand management, so one of the key considerations, so what is our operational capacity and how can we build additional capacity in the first instance from what we have today, and in the second instance about increasing new operational capacity. And just one example from our world is, we wouldn't normally have an evening shift in our Ballina warehouse. We were able to introduce reasonably quickly a new evening shift there to take a little bit of pressure off the system, but at the same time build that additional capacity. From a fleet perspective, as you probably know, we have dedicated fleets, but they're provided from a third party. So, we needed absolute alignment with that third party in terms of health and safety, and again, this critical care infrastructure status. But we needed to max out the fleet. We needed that fleet to work harder. We needed to add new vans. At one stage, we had 50 extra vans in the system, which is quite considerable at very, very short notice. And you're also looking to build in redundancy, because if a driver became ill or had symptoms, you needed more drivers than vans, to keep that additional capacity rolling as much as we possibly could. And I guess one piece of good news was, because the rest of the country was broadly speaking at home, actually moving around the place again with our critical care status made the travel times much more efficient than they would be on a normal day of the week. And I guess what we're trying to do at the same time, guys, is manage the cost of all of this additional activity because of the nature of the financials of the business, and just kind of maintaining control of our cost base. And the other key thing is, how long is this going to last? So we have the initial spike. We now got a bit of downtime. But there's a second spike coming. Do we need to keep this infrastructure in place, or how much of it in place? So a lot of big decisions around our operational and our fleet capacity that we managed as well as we possibly could. In terms of the next slide. So the question here is, even though we have, it's not moving for me, Dermot, but I'll take it that it's moving for you, if that's okay. So even though we have increased our capacity, we also needed to right-size demand, or make our best efforts to do so. So how did we do that? So in terms of the fastest selling SKUs, as I mentioned earlier, the level of demand was absolutely staggering, and we need to make sure that we distributed products as equitably as we possibly could. So on the fastest selling SKUs, we introduced product allocations, and we tried to do that in a manner that was representative of the relative size of customers. So for the fastest products, we were kind of looking at previous sales, plus 30%, plus 50%. So we tried to make it as fair and as relative as we possibly could, but we needed those allocations to right size the demand. In terms of having clear sight of demand, as I mentioned earlier, customers were understandably trying to order from every available source. So we needed to kind of declutter the way those orders were coming at us. So we suspended reps transfer orders. They are a big feature of the consumer health world, and other third-party orders. And then we also suspended a wide range of front-of-counter products. So I think about 1,500 products. We just suspended these products again to make space for the fastest and most important selling products. And I would say at this point, where we had to do that the companies that were affected by those decisions were extremely understanding of what we had to do and why we had to do it, and that was very much appreciated. And in terms of, the fastest selling SKUs, those allocations, and the demand planning and the ordering, we reviewed that as part of our crisis management brief on a daily basis, and we tweaked it as we went forward. From a financial perspective, certainly after the peak, the government intervention created quite a considerable slowdown in activity, and we've seen that in the IQVIA charts. And also from our perspective, again, in a business that has very high turnover and very low single-digit gross margins, making sure you get paid is really important, because we're now extending credit to customers where we wouldn't normally deal with at that level. Probably in hindsight wasn't such a big issue, but it was an issue for some customers, but just something that we really needed to do to manage the situation when your costs were going up by $500,000 per company. Just one anecdote, if you like, or one what I'm calling an unintended consequence. When you go through a period like this, things happen that you never expect to happen. And just one example of many is actually we came across situations whereby customers were unwilling to sign PODs because of safety concerns and concerns of infection. And whilst we understood that and we absolutely left the goods where they were intended to be, that subsequently led to non-payment of invoices because there wasn't a signed POD available. And again, that became a conversation with the HSE, because probably that happened more in the hospital world than the retail world. And in fairness, largely speaking, we got that sorted out. So that's just probably a little bit more detail of what Dermot was talking about in terms of how we had to communicate, how we tried to increase capacity, right-size demands, and do our best to get as much product as we could of the right product out to our customer base. In terms of our next steps, and the next slide, please, Dermot, thank you. What we now need to do is, align ourselves to the government roadmap. And I guess for us, we have a significant amount of people still working from home. So we maintain our absolute priority of keeping our sites accessible, keeping our sites safe. But our teams also need certainty. We know that working from home isn't for everybody. So we need to plan accordingly. As a general comment, we will lag government advice, but we are involved, as I'm sure all of your companies are involved, in risk assessing our existing office-based infrastructure. In some cases, we've got essential staff who actually may need to come back and work from the office. We're risk assessing what's at home, preparing induction programs for everybody in line with national protocols, and then all of the other, on the bottom of that chart, all of the other policy communications, both internally and externally, that we need to do to make sure that we are prepared for whatever the new world looks like from a return to work perspective. Just one slide, guys. That we've been talking pretty much about our Irish experience, and as Dermot mentioned, as you look across Europe, pretty similar experiences in terms of absolute surge in demand. As I mentioned earlier, not everywhere, and hard to understand it, but not everywhere got this critical infrastructure status. In some markets, exporting is a very big dynamic within the market, and in a number of countries, exports were absolutely banned to ensure products were available for local supply. And then from a European perspective, feeding back into global supply chains, ensuring that from an API perspective, there were green lanes to get product from the Far East into European manufacturing plants. That was a very important aspect of some of the stuff that we witnessed. And in certain markets, there was an absolute shortage of COVID products. So, and I think in hindsight, from a supply chain perspective, and certainly from a critical medicines perspective, that in Ireland, between all of the stakeholders, as we look back, we probably overall did quite a decent job. And I think from a patient perspective, we can look back and have that thought. In terms of our I guess as we look at this, and I'm just about to wrap up, on the left-hand side of that particular chart, initially we're talking about protecting our colleagues, serving our customers, and maintaining an infrastructure that will continue to serve our customers should we get another spike. On the right-hand side of that chart, we're talking about, what actions did we take that actually worked the best? What actions did we take that will better enhance our service offering for the future? That's probably work in progress, if I'm quite honest with you. But we've gone from the reaction phase to the learning and understanding phase, and we need to move along that path. And just by way of conclusion, as we look back on this, there was absolute excellent collaboration across all stakeholders, and that was very much in the public interest. And I would say strong collaboration. I would probably add the word trust to that statement. We would hope there's an improved understanding of the importance of a safe, secure, and integrated supply chain. And certainly, when we look back, we would have to mention people. There are wonderful examples across both of our businesses where people, really went the extra mile. Be they in warehouses, driving vans, at customer services, figuring out IT solutions. There was a very strong resolution to succeed. There was lots of energy. There was lots of resilience, and that's great to see at a time, when everyone's really been asked to step up to the mark. From a business perspective, and again, Dermot has mentioned this, the overall revenue performance for the period to date is actually quite weak when you look back over the entire period, and the cost of COVID has been quite substantial, and it's a cost that unfortunately we are managing ourselves, and I'm sure each organisation has probably also managed an additional COVID cost within your own P&Ls. And I guess just the last comment that I would like to make is that we do have another challenge, and it's not too far away. We've done a lot of work on Brexit to date, but we have another job of work to be completed. So while we continue to manage COVID, our day-to-day operations, we're now looking at re-engagement and getting on top of whatever Brexit is going to bring, but also ensuring that from an Irish perspective that we continue to supply the market in the manner in which we have been doing so to date. So that's my contribution, and thank you very much for your attention. I'm not too sure if Dermot would like to add a closing comment to that. You might be on mute.
Yeah, you're muted, Dermot.
Sorry, guys. No, I think you've summed it up very well, David. We've plenty more challenges coming at us in terms of Brexit, and also maybe even a second wave. Hopefully not, but I think that could land on our doorstep. So I think you've summed it up well.
Thank you.
I just want to thank both of you. That was a fantastic presentation from you both, and we certainly appreciate the time that you went in to putting it together. I think the speed at which you turn things around and all the steps that you have to implement is just phenomenal. So well done to both of you. A couple of questions that have come in here throughout it. First question here is from Alan Downey of GSK. He'd like to wish and to compliment both wholesalers for an excellent job, especially during the months of March and April in meeting our patients' needs. His question for you is, do you envisage a COVID stock build for the winter period, and have the government given any wish to do so?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Dermot, if you don't mind. Thank you very much, Alan. I think as we look back, the fact that the market has a very strong pre-wholesale sector. So, as Dermot pointed out, we have United Drug Distributors and we have Alpha Services, representing the vast majority of companies, and within those organizations, we're holding on average, 6 to 8 week stock, in some cases even more. So, there is resilience in the system already. We have not been specifically asked to do anything above and beyond what we normally do. But we do know, in particular, in relation to flu, Alan, that the government is planning a far stronger flu campaign as we approach the winter, in an effort to make sure that we don't have a flu spike and a COVID spike happening at the same time. So hopefully that answers your question.
Perfect. Dermot, do you want to add? Are you okay?
No, that's okay. I think
perfect.
David has answered it.
So another question that came in here is, while these were unprecedented times, were there any lessons learned and any changes you might adopt long term to improve the efficiency of the business? Perhaps your thoughts on the introduction of artificial intelligence in the business.
Well, I'll take that, David, if you like. I think, you know, David mentioned that McKesson have the Ballina facility and you know, the additional capacity that brings. We don't have that luxury, but we are looking at maybe adding additional automation and the ability to run night shift in our Limerick depot that would service the south of the country. So I think that's something that we will try and fast track over the next number of months. And that project has already begun. The other part of the question, sorry, Emer.
Perhaps your thoughts on the introduction of artificial intelligence in the business.
Yeah, well, we do, like we do have a level of you know, robotic type analysis of data and stuff like that. So we do have, you know, automated process, you know, the machine learning type things in the business. I think that the challenge we face is that, you know, because we're highly automated, that, you know, you still have to get the stock into position, and you still have, so even if you understand what's happening, you still have to be able to physically react to that, and that type of thing. So that's a challenge. But I think, look, there's learnings all over the business as part of COVID, and you know, I think we will be endeavouring, I think, both businesses to try and take some of those things on board and bring them into the business and streamline and further automate if and where we can.
Perfect. And another question here from Brian Gavin of MAP Biopharma. He says, thank you, Dermot and David. Excellent presentation. Looking to the future, the programme for government mentions the establishment of a National Medicines Agency. Do either of you have any thoughts or insights in relation to this?
Yeah. Good morning, Brian. Yeah, guys, we've been following the programme for government, and I think we need to learn a little bit more about the role of the National Medicines Agency, but I think from our perspective, because, you know, as we look back, you know, we probably haven't done a good job at stakeholder engagement at a government level. So, we've improved that as of this recent pandemic, and I guess what we need to do is to make sure that people understand the role and the importance of what we do, and that from a remuneration perspective, that's also properly recognised. So, if like, we have our own ambition from a government perspective, you know, which I guess you guys can see and can appreciate. So hopefully, if a new agency is established, Brian, we'll have some voice when they come to communicate with the market.
Perfect. And another question here from Brenda Dooley of Access Consulting. Thanks, Dermot and David. Fantastic presentation, and well done for keeping the supply chain in Ireland during these unprecedented times. So that was Brenda saying hello to you all and well done. Another question that came in here was, if we knew then what we know now, what would you do differently? And also, what would you suggest that the HSC would do differently?
It probably sounds like it's my turn. It sounds like a radio show. Is there a way?
Oh yeah, Joe Duffy here all the way.
I think personally, you know, if you look at it, we you know, Christmas, Q4 Christmas is our peak period, and you know, we start planning for that as far back as sort of the end of August, early September. We're starting to build stock. We're starting to look at additional capacity where we can. We didn't get that sort of time to react, probably. So if you were knowing what we know today, I'd probably look at, you know, putting additional capacity into the regional depots would probably be the one thing I would say. David might have a different opinion, but that would be my take on it. But just to give ourselves some breathing space. But the reality was, and David mentioned this, the amount of demand that was coming at us. I think, even if we had a third wholesaler in the market, I'm not sure, the three businesses would have been able to manage that. And I think that's just a reflection of maybe the panic and some of the other issues that were at play. But they would be my takeaways.
Yeah, Dermot, I wouldn't add to that. I mean, but sorry, the only thing I would add, I think from a crisis management perspective, we probably reacted as well as we possibly could. We didn't make everybody happy, but I think we reacted well, and people reacted well, and and I think from a stakeholder perspective, the communications learning, which was probably somewhat put in place by Brexit, to be honest with you, but having the ability to communicate clearly with very important stakeholders was a positive that has come from this.
I look at what's happened in, say, the meat processing industry in the last number of weeks, and the issues they've had. I mean, our priority was to stay alive, getting the stock through the system and out into hospital and pharmacy. So that was priority number one. And to do that, we had to manage our facilities and make our facilities safe. And we had to make decisions that maybe were unpopular in certain parts of the market, but we did it to, we weren't doing it out of, just necessity, really. We had no other choice at times. But I think when you look at what's happened in other industries, specifically the meat processing, we've done well, and we've protected both our distribution systems.
Perfect. Another question that came in here is it's from Louise McSweeney, and she says, thanks for a fantastic presentation. In relation to Brexit, do you envisage the HPRA requesting an increase in stock levels ahead of a potential hard Brexit at the end of the year? For example, a minimum of 8 to 10 weeks that was previously requested.
Yeah, so Louise, on that basis, I don't see the HPRA, giving specific guidance. I think the expectation of the HPRA is that each company, in conjunction with its distributor, ensuring that there is sufficient stock in the market. Because when you look at this, when you look at what happens today, so certainly from our engagement with our pre-wholesale clients, a number of clients who in the past would have distributed from the UK have now right-sized their distribution infrastructure. They've changed the model, and they're now distributing into Ireland from an EU-based facility. So a lot of changes have already taken place to take account of Brexit. In advance of what we thought was going to be the first phase of Brexit. Each company will look at it individually. And I certainly from our perspective, we've commenced engagement with companies again, just to ensure that we identify any potential weaknesses and we work around those weaknesses.
Perfect. And just one final question that came in, and it's something that struck me as well, that slide you put up with the $1 million, upwards of $1 million, or euros, should I say, that's been spent by both companies. We know that there's been a lot of smaller businesses that have received state support over the last few months. Have you received any government funding at all to negate this cost?
No. No. I think that other sectors have. I think that even the hairdressers have, but we haven't received anything to date. And being honest, I don't think we expect to receive anything. David, I don't know if you've anything to add to that, but
no, it is. Yeah, I guess from our side, guys, it's somewhat frustrating when you see the criticality of what we do, and the size and scale of what we do, vis-a-vis other small businesses. But no, listen, at this point in time, we tried, but we got a big fat no.
Okay, so you're absorbing all the costs yourselves. And I suppose one last question. So in the last couple of months, I know that you were inundated for the first couple of months of COVID, but there's been low sales in the past couple of months. So does that mean that you're currently overstocked?
Well, I think when we got to sort of the when the demand started to fall away, sort of in mid to late April, we obviously had to try and recover our stock position, because we were probably running very very thin levels of stock across our businesses. Certainly, speaking with my Uniphar hat on here, but so we had to rebuild and recover, and being realistic, like that probably took us until mid to late May to do that. So I think we're back to normal levels of stock. I wouldn't say we're overstocked. Certainly is my within the Uniphar business.
Yeah. From our perspective, exactly the same. But there are, probably particular companies where you're planning for certain activities, but because of government intervention and generally the public not being out there, not visiting hospitals, not visiting GPs. So in certain areas there would be an overstock issue, and that takes a little while to, as it takes a little while to build it up, it also takes a little bit of a while to take it back down again.
Perfect, great. Well, unless there's any other questions there, Oliver, do you want to hop in there?
Yeah, I'll just say thanks very much again, Dermot. Thanks very much, David. Really well done for the last number of months. I think it's really important that you, for your part, and just like us, we will engage with the government, the Department of Health, and so on, and HSE, not just to sort of congratulate ourselves on how well we worked together, which we did in the crisis, but also to say there are some really important deep learnings to come from this. And for you, of course, it's the role of your critical role in the thing, and indeed the dependency that the whole country has on you, and that whole question of the economics of the business and so on and so forth. So I think it really is worth engaging on those issues, and not just say, well, when the crisis is past, let's all just relax and go back to the normal. We really do have to, proactively go and think about ourselves, what lessons we do draw, and how we're going to make things better in the future, and what strategic positioning we should have in the future. And I suppose that's for us, in IFA, for yourselves, to bring forward those ideas. We'll certainly be doing that in the context of our new agreement negotiations, but I know that you have that role for yourselves as well. So, as I say, thank you very much again for everybody for joining. Dermot, if I jumbled your name at the start, I'm deeply apologetic. I mixed you up with a very eminent doctor.
That's all right.
He was in my mind. And we'll do this again. Emer, thank you for organising, and we look forward to the next event. And thanks to all the guests and people for attending.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. And the slides will be available. David and Dermot have kindly allowed us to use the slides so we can circulate them later.